And now for some comments from Dr. Rafael Sanchez, who is Senior Lecturer at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. He writes on media, mass politics, populism, monumentalization of politics, and spirit mediumship. He is the author of Dancing Jacobin, a Venezuelan genealogy of Latin American populism. His recent project, The Fate of Sovereignty in the Landscape of the City, focuses on forms of popular imagination and territorializing practices in contemporary urban Venezuela. Welcome, Dr. Sanchez.
I think these two papers in peculiar ways resonate with each other and with other themes that I want to bring up in my discussion, such as theopolitics, for example. And start with stimuli first. I mean, I start with stimuli first because I read stimuli first, and then I go to your paper. I mean, I think the issue you posed about a kind of legitimacy, sacred legitimacy, that somehow replaces or complements, depending on what, the kind of sacred legitimacy that is characteristic of political theology, is fascinating. A legitimacy that in your rendition is consistent with the market and the unfolding of the market. It's interesting that you bring Hayek. Hayek is everywhere nowadays. I mean, it's interesting that when I was younger, Hayek was, why you read Hayek, right? And now, you know, for example, the partner of Judith Butler, what's her name, Wendy Brown, project is all about Hayek and the way in which the thinking of Hayek has been feeding the new right in this country for a long, long time. And the same, you know, it's reappearing in many, many contexts. And so I think that that's fascinating, but and I will return to it. And going back to your paper, I mean, the whole issue of the deconstruction of the secular and the religious, the way in which one should trace continuities in the religious traditions, in secularism is not only fundamental, it connects also to a very, very, very fundamental body of work in political theology that has been conducted, especially in North America, but also in Europe, Agamben and all these people in the last years. And I think it's fundamental. It also, what is crucial about it is that it enables, it's also something, by the way, that has been pointed out by minorities in Europe and elsewhere for a long time. I mean, you know, you say that secularism is non-religious, but all I see is Christianity, right? And the fact that we are being excluded from fundamental arenas and so on and so forth. So that is something that in the experience of the subjects is raised continuously, right? I would like to complement your reading with the reading of Talal Asad of this problem, because Talal Asad, your emphasis is in continuity, and the great significance of emphasizing continuities allows us to understand some critical exclusions, exclusion of Islam, for instance, etc. Now, Talal makes in my reading a crucial inflection in this argument, which is to say there are continuities, to be sure, between previous religious traditions, but there are radical discontinuities between the secular and the previous religious. So the task should be not only to find traces of the pre-political in previous religious tradition, but also to understand how the secular itself amounts to a fundamental reorganization of subjective experiences, practices, forms of discipline, and so on and so forth. In this reading of Talal, this continuity is all important, and the importance of emphasizing this continuity is that it allows one to connect the issue of secularism, political theology, and so on and so forth, not only, which is very important, what you did, to forms of exclusion of other religious traditions, but also to the connection of the secular to political theology and to the modern state, and nationalism and imperialism. So it situates it in a completely different set of coordinates, whereby, for instance, all the emphasis in Talal about superstition of the other was intrinsic to the movement of empire into the colonies, right? I mean, so it calls attention to a fundamental reorganization of experience that is largely discontinuous with previous religious traditions, which brings me back to theopolitics. how does Talal, I mean, I was reading Talal again for this conference, and I was thinking of Valentina's and Carlotta's McAllister formulations, and I thought there are incredible resonances between the two, because what does Talal say about what is excessive vis-a-vis political theology? Political theology in Talal and in others has to be understood as a movement connected to the formation of the nation states in Europe, to the treaties of Westphalia, and all that kind of thing, of transcendentalization. I mean, of the extrication of the religion from embodied practices and embedded practices, right? So what is the excess that Talal, I think, and others, but in Talal it's very clear that he points out vis-a-vis the political theological, that movement of why is political theological transcendentalized? It constituted religion as a separate sphere from which the sovereign constitutes the totality by appeal to it. So it's always a matter of constituting a totality vis-a-vis a constitutive outside. And it's a relationship of outside out, inside, and demarcation, what is fundamental to the political theological, which is precisely, as you so well point out, in what is in crisis today. What is in crisis today is what authors like Jean-Luc Lancy have called the retreat of the political theological. In the face of what? That's the question. In the face of the market and financialization, but also in the face of the theopolitical, as Valentina and Carlotta talk about it. So there is a double movement here. It's a movement on the one hand to that internalization of power that you, in the individual, and faith in the individual, the ingraining of it that you so well mentioned, by which the individual is constituted as the preeminent actor of the economical and necessary to it. It's a matter of digitalization, either or, you know, I am going to become everything, but within a very controlled way. It's the kind of consuming subjects that capitalism needs, but there is an excess to it. The excess of economimesis that Derrida talked about, for example, the excess of becoming other uncontrollably, of the kind of non-separation between the signifier and the signified, of the sacred that Talal Asad talked about, right?
Thank you all for your participation in this session, and please join me in thanking our speakers for getting us off to a great start this morning.